Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Our next speaker is one of those people who, when you look at the list of companies that he's worked with, it would be much easier to list the companies that he hasn't worked with because he's been with so many. Kixeye, Ubisoft, Electronic Arts. Just a sampling of this man's very broad and deep industry experience. Now, when I was talking to him about what he would like me to say in the introduction, it seemed very important to him for me to mention that he can be bribed with food. Ladies and gentlemen, Bernard Chen.
Hey everybody. So I came into video games in about 2008, 2009. I came out of traditional software development as a product manager focusing on things like user interface and e-commerce. So in 2009, I had a conversation with a friend of mine asking, what's a new interesting field to go into? And the person referred me to a VC, and this person pointed me to Pogo and some other kind of games. And they said, have you seen this virtual economy thing? And I looked at these games and I thought, there's no way this is gonna work. Like this is so not what I want to play when I buy a game, right? Like some little dinky thing where I have to pay $5 to buy a bunch of tokens, and then little do we know that that's where our industry goes. So I say that because, whoa. Sorry, blackout button. All right. Just to give a perspective on my background. So when I'm talking about LiveOps, I'm very much product manager, design centric. My TD, he's always punching me in the arm saying, why don't you give us more credit? Engineering is really, really important. A lot of what we do in ops is fixing bugs, is making sure things are scalable, that they're stable. But from what I've seen, you can have some nearly suicidally bad engineering, and if your product is well designed, it'll be pretty resilient. Whereas you can have the best engineering in the world, but if you make a bunch of incorrect design decisions, it doesn't really matter, right? So that's a point that later off stage, I would love to talk to people about how bad can your engineering be and you'll still succeed. All right, so I started my gaming career, I did a little bit of work at EA, but it was mostly at Ubisoft where I was on Ghost Recon. It used to be called Ghost Recon Online, it's now Ghost Recon Phantoms. Learned a lot of valuable lessons about people's willingness to pay and the effect of skill in free-to-play games. The thing about GR was that it was a very skill-dependent game. It's one of the few games where if you play with somebody else and you team up and you know what you're doing, it almost doesn't matter what gear the other team has, you'll win. So from a hardcore perspective, this is very, very fun. From a monetization perspective, this is horrible. So if you've been in the game for 9 months and you're a really engaged player and you've spent a lot of money, a team of relatively new people, maybe a week in, can just wipe the floor with you. And so, very interesting lesson. I see this trend in free-to-play gaming today where the effect of immediate skill is being reduced and more weight is getting put on the metagame. And for me, that was clearly an example of what happened here. After Ubisoft, I ended up at Kixeye, where I was director of product on Battle Pirates, and later the GM of War Commander. And to put that stuff in perspective, if Battle Pirates were a mobile game, it'd be top 25. So it still is a pretty big game. I saw a lot of DAO, a lot of MAO. It was super interesting to be able to run an experiment for a day or two and get hundreds of thousands of N through that experiment and see results like that quickly. All right. So how am I defining LiveOps? It's reacting to the game in near real time. I strongly recommend not reacting to the game in real time. I try to push people not to look at the data and make changes all the time because of what I'm going to talk about later in this deck. But the management is on events, things that come out. You're going to release a weekly, a monthly. You might have daily. You might have random. And really drilling the second point, feature cadence. And of course, there's some tuning and there's some bug fixing, and that stuff you have to get right. And so in the end, you end up feeling like Jarvis's arm, where you're waiting to put Tony Stark out of fire or build something. All right, so this is the context that I'm giving this talk because I play a lot of games that I love. And what I end up seeing pretty early on, maybe like 10, 15 minutes into a game, is that somebody made a game out of passion and love, and they kind of ignored the business reason why you would make a game. Here's the business reason. You have to earn enough money to pay back the marketing expense. This is non-trivial, right? Like in a really, really good game, they plow through their eCPI and they can hit break even in a couple of days. Rumor had it that for pretty early on in the Game Award lifecycle, they stopped measuring break-even point because they were hitting something like $20 in 30 days. They're just like, oh, screw it. Our acquisition costs aren't anywhere near there. We stopped caring. All right, that's a pretty rare place to be. For everybody else, it's a big deal just to hit your break-even point, your return on every player that you end up buying. Big mountain. The next big mountain is to pay back your project costs. All ballpark project costs are, $1 million to $3 million. So you're really only paying that back after you've paid back your marketing expense. And so you can have a really successful, what feels successful, a game that's making $1 million or $2 million a month. But if the project costs $3 million and it takes 90 days to pay back your marketing expense, you're really not even paying back the project for 4 months after that. But you have this UA function where it's easy to get players very early on in your cycle, and from there on out, it's just like declining, right? So you'll get the most players you're ever going to get, unless you're one of the top 10 guys. You'll get the most players you're ever going to get at the very beginning, and then you're declining. So you're racing these two things. You're racing to make back your marketing expense, and you'll start to make that back. That per cohort, the way that function works doesn't really change. But you're trying to pay back your project costs before the number of your downloads goes down, before your players churn out of the game, before you run out of content, a whole bunch of befores. So I've seen a lot, we know, a lot of projects don't make these two mountains. They don't cross these two. But to be realistic about it, that's not even what you need to do. You need to pay back marketing, you have to pay back the project. At that point, you're break even. All the risk that you're taking, you need to take some money home for this. So you need marketing expense, you need project cost, you need whatever profit margin you are saying is your goal, and something to compensate for your risk premium. This is massive. This is a lot of money you have to make to be a viable company. That's not even it. So the last thing that you have to be able to do is hard, and you have to be able to fund the next project, right? If all you do is you build your project, you take some profit home, and no one just disbands, no one leaves after that. You're going to try to make another game. This is a pile of money you have to make. So what do you have to do this? I keep deciding where to put this one slide. I'm going to warn everybody of something that I notice. I call this build revenue. Internally at Scopely, some other people call it shark fin, and you see this all the time. You see a game, whether it's a hero's charge, where it's based on collecting a team of heroes, just like Ethan was talking about, or my specialty is with empire builders and exploration games, where there's this stage where the player is amassing a toolkit of stuff that they can use, and revenue looks great. And as soon as they're done with that toolkit, revenue looks horrible. We as an industry need to put a name on this thing so we can tell each other not to do this anymore. There are so many games that I like where I play it for an hour and I realize, oh my God, they're going to fall into that pit. And I'm not going to list any of them because it's just mean, but this is something I just want to warn everyone about. Having good live ops will get you around this problem where you're basically just generating build revenue while the person is amassing their toolkit, their armies, their base, their heroes, whatever it is. Then after that, you realize that you don't have enough monetization mechanics in the game to generate revenue anymore. I understand why this happens. Usually this is at a point that's 10 to 12 weeks out. Unless you're Supercell, nobody gets to test that long. So maybe you went through a month or 2 or 3 or 4 of beta testing, but in a 4-month test, you might have tested a 30 or 45-day loop once and made an iteration and tested it one more time. You did not test a 12-week loop 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. So I'll talk about how to get around this, but I want to does anyone else think this happens? Anyone else not think this happens? Anyone never noticed this before? All right, we're all seeing this. Let's stop making games that make revenue for like 3 months and then crash. It's tragic because you need to pay back your project. You need to pay back your your net profit margin, and you need to fund the next game. If your game is only going to last for 3 months, it's not going to do any of those things. Okay. So my spin on LiveOps is about planning and what you need to do to make LiveOps as pain-free as possible. And I say this from a position of scar tissue. I've seen a couple different teams now, and generally I've seen what happens when teams are being heroic. So people are working overtime, they're crunching. The key sign of heroic behavior is that you're planning 2 to 4 weeks out, and that's it. The key sign of good process is on Battle Pirates with weekly releases, we were planning 12 weeks out, and I could probably tell you what we were doing. We had a content roadmap for 12 months. We knew exactly what we were doing for 12 weeks, and we could probably give you pretty good estimates of what's going on, maybe in weeks 15 or 18, and that's 18 sprints out. When you get to that point where the process is that good, what happens is the thing that's killing most free-to-play games is that you've got a bunch of game systems and they interact with each other. So in a game like Battle Pirates, you're building ships, you take ships out, you go and you attack things, and then the ship gets damaged, you have to bring it back, you have to repair it, maybe you'll upgrade the ship. You have a secondary system, which will be something like, a secondary related system would be something like we used to have certain targets that were susceptible to a kind of ship, like a sub. So normally what we expect is you're going to go blow something up, you're going to take a ship, you're going to go take damage, you'll come back, there's a percentage chance that you'll spend repair revenue. But we have the secondary system that's a sub. The sub can go out there, blow it up for nothing. And what that's doing is it's releasing a whole bunch of monetization pressure out of the game. With enough time to think about every system that we're adding into the game, we can make sure those little edge cases don't exist. It's why process matters. It's why planning 12 weeks out makes a big difference over being heroic and building a feature today, or building a feature for the next sprint, right? Thinking about it for 2 weeks, then building the thing. More reasons why process matters. The reality is, your team's going to be bigger in live than it is in dev. If your game looks like it's got heat on it, the unit economics of having another employee are going to favor you adding somebody, right? Before you went live, all of us are just expected value. We think this game is going to make X. We think we can staff a team of about this size. Once you go live, you see revenue coming in, and it's like, okay, each one of us is probably worth about $1 million a year, that kind of a thing. We can have another headcount over here, over there. But we know that as team size increases, complexity increases. So it's got to be less and less heroic over time. It's more about the process. Kind of related to Ethan's talk earlier about the Tower of Want, players need to see new content. I say it's every week. What happens is that over time, if you think about a cohort of players, for everybody who's left, after people churn out, the average kind of level of engagement of everyone who's remaining is increasing, right? Everyone who didn't like your game left. The only people who are still in there like your game more and more and more over time, especially as that cohort is kind of distilling down to the core people who love you. And what they're doing is they're engaging the living daylights out of your game. They're touching everything, they're learning all the angles. If people are playing 6 to 10 sessions a day after a week, they've put a lot of time into thinking about your game. If you don't release content on a pretty regular basis, they'll run out of things to think about. And that's one of the reasons why they churn. It's not an interesting environment. It's not a fun toy anymore. So you have to be on this kind of a cycle. I'm aiming for weekly content releases. The part about the regardless of the update cycle is you don't have to push a new client build, right? You can unlock stuff on the server side. So it's not an engineering challenge as much as it is a design challenge. Maybe there's some initial architecture. Sorry. Other things on process. So I mentioned that on Battle Pirates War Commander, we were focusing on 12 sprint windows. We knew the world that far out. Another very helpful way to think about things is if you think about a 12-month horizon, or 6 or 9, but 12 is pretty helpful, you want to make choices where 12 months from now, the choice that you made today, you'll still feel it. So an example I have for this is if you have 2 features, and they're both going to make $1 million, and one of them is going to make $1 million this month, and the other one will make $1 million spread over 12 months. And I know about the time value of money, so yeah, in a lot of situations, you'll just take the $1 million now. There's actually reasons why you may not want to do that. If you take the $1 million now, next month you're back in the scramble, and everyone expects for you to make another $1 million. If you take the feature that spreads out the $1 million over, it's probably most of it this month, and it's kind of gently arcing beyond that. If you layer 8, 9, 10 of these features, what you have is a very predictable revenue stream. Month over month, maybe 70–80% of your revenue is coming from things that you built in the past. If you completely choke your build this month, nothing really bad happens. If you're in that scenario where every month you're releasing a $1 million feature and you blow it, you will feel it big time that month. So taking that long-term horizon, assuming you've got stacking features, is a very good way to do it. All right, so every day, what does it look like? So you can do this kind of long-term planning and focus on process. You're gonna look at your data every day. You're gonna brainstorm new features. You're gonna repair broken tech, and you're gonna favor tech that will change your design. For example, we built a unit in War Commander where you could repair it to 1 hit point and it would do 100% of its damage. This is a problem, right? Because that means everyone goes, they repair it for 2 seconds. Now they can take the unit back out and blow something up, bring it back and repair it for 2 seconds. What we should have done is fix it immediately. We didn't fix that unit for a year, which means that for a year we were making design decisions based around the existence of that unit. And that thing was incredibly toxic. So when you're deciding whether you should repair tech or not, I said earlier, it's surprising how bad your tech can be and you'll still survive. But if it affects design, you probably need to fix it very, very soon. And it's the same principle for building future tech as the 12-month planning issue. If you build tech that will give you a system, that's a great thing to build. So this is another step to be able to plan out in the future and kind of handle the LiveOps world. Make 2 points about monetization. Usually what I see is that there are not enough mechanics. And when I look at gacha-based games, I think this is true. I know that as a specialty, I come out of the kind of territorial expansion, RTS kind of games. I look at gacha and I know that it works, but I think that gacha is always riding that edge of there are not enough mechanics because, as Ethan was pointing out, if you fill out your team, it is very hard. If you fill out your team and in a proper gacha mechanic, the expected drop of something that you need has to be very low, you are not encouraged to do anything else. So monetization fails because of not enough mechanics, and that thing I talked about pressure releasing edge cases. The pressure releasing edge cases are super hard to find. You want to spend as much time as you can looking for them before you build that feature. So what you want is what I'm calling the triangle, which is a game designer, a product manager, and an analyst. And I don't know if, how many people actually work in a relationship like this? Okay. I think that PMs are still pretty new in gaming, and analysts, I still see some teams where they don't embed an analyst. The roles that I have for these guys are that game designers are focused on player experience, on the narrative, usually on the power curve, and balancing individual units, objects, that kind of thing. The role that I have for product managers is they're responsible for basically revenue. They will do A/B testing, they will do some kinds of behavioral economic hacks, so kind of Dan O'Reilly contextual pricing kind of stuff. They will do, they'll look at the quality and the quantity of your monetization loops. So when you hear Ethan talk, he sounds very much like a PM. The two overlap a lot because game designers and product managers both focus on compulsion loops, but I've seen some game designers cross over to the PM side. I've yet to see any PMs cross over to the game design side. They are pretty distinct roles, and they pair up very nicely. So the game designer is always thinking about what can I do next that's kind of fun and interesting. And the PM will say, well, if you take one variant of that idea you've got, we can make $200,000 with this feature. If you take the other variant, you're going to break something and we'll lose $200,000. The analyst's job is to frame questions. So what you don't want is an analyst who just runs queries. The game design and PM team will ask the analyst, hey, I'm thinking about this, help me dig this up in data. The analyst will frame it so that the query actually results in some data that is actionable. And they're also there because very frequently, they're the ones with the best idea of what good experimental design looks like. So you're structuring this A/B test, and they should be able to tell you that this test is junk, right? It's just, you're going to test 2 conditions that you just don't care about. You don't have a control group. If you have the 3 of these guys, the next step is you can put people like this in a room. I recommend it 1 day a week, lunchtime, provide lunch, and they just brainstorm. You have everything that you need to look ahead in your future design, talk about things before you need to build it. So what happens very frequently on my teams is we'll sit around in our weekly brainstorm lunch. You've got an analyst who knows they're just the arbiter of truth, right? They're the data priest. You've got game design, you've got product, and we're kicking around ideas. None of the ideas are due this week. That's the point. And we think of some idea, and it goes back and forth. And at the end, we're like, wow, that was there's kind of a kernel of good stuff there, but most of it's junk. Next week, we do it again, kernel of good stuff, most of it's junk. 3 months later, we need to build a feature, and what we say is, oh yeah, I just thought of something. That idea that you thought of 2 months ago, plus the other thing we talked about last week, plus this thing that just came up, is a coherent feature, and everyone nods because they've heard all the bits of it before. They've thought through the edge cases. They've looked for the things that are pressure releases, right, that just sync the monetization mechanic. So this is the triangle that you need. If it's just game designers or just product, it does not work the same. It's not as healthy. So in the talk about LiveOps, this is where it ends up, strangely enough. When I was working at Ubisoft, we had access to a pretty large portfolio of free-to-play games and a very good analytics team. And one of the things that we found was that it's very, very difficult to change a game that's not doing well in its first 60 days. And it's not something that I want to believe or act on because as an optimist, as a guy who's on the dev team, I think I can fix anything, right? It's just a matter of difficulty. But realistically speaking, if your game has one critical flaw in it, you can sit down, dig through your systems, find the flaw, and fix it. If you have 2 critical flaws, it might touch 3 or 4 different systems. If you have 5 or 6 critical flaws, you probably can't fix your game by changing one system at a time. I'm pretty sure that you could fix one system, the whole thing will get worse. Fix a second system, the whole thing. You'd have to fix all 6 systems at the same time. So if you have enough critical flaws, you'll never recover your game. It's done. Which means when you backtrack, what do you have to do? All right, so the reason I'm talking about LiveOps is because I want to make a profitable game, because I want to pay back all of my project costs plus a premium so I can work on the next game. To be able to do that, I have to be able to do planning. To be able to do planning, I have to have the right triangle of people. For those people to have a really good effect, they actually have to spend a lot of time in pre-production. Because it looks like this, right? The egg turns into a chick, it turns into a chicken. It's not going to turn into a tiger, right? So the thing that you built in pre-pro, if you don't have a system that's going to handle components on a unit, you're probably not going to be able to retrofit that in later. And you won't get the dynamic monetization and player choice and strategy that you would get out of that kind of a system. So LiveOps is an extension of what you did in pre-pro. All right, a little bit rambling. Thanks, everybody. So I wanted to say, that I do think that too little information is shared in our industry. People are really, really precious about stuff. I tend not to be. If you've talked to me and we're not at the same company, like I won't tell you stats and I won't tell you metrics, right? Because that's dangerous. But I will share philosophy, and I think that's a really important thing for us to do. Because the people that have worked on teams who've seen what successful free-to-play looks like, we've seen things that no one else knows. And if we don't share, I remember the stat from GDC this year was there are 500 new games in the App Store every day. So 15,000 a month. And I'm in a ballpark that I see maybe 1 or 2 break the top 100, maybe every other month. You've got something like a 1 out of 30,000 chance of making anything good. This stinks. Like, I have friends in this industry. I don't want to see people making games that are dead ends. Like, it's not going to be financially valuable. So let's share. So here's my email. I won't give you metrics. I'll talk theory. I'll talk theory with most people, anybody. But I focus on product management, free-to-play, and economics. So that's where you'll get the most juice.
And psychology.
And psych.
Yeah, he's multi-talented. Thank you, Bernard. That was awesome. I have a question for you, which is, there's the saying, your numbers can't hurt you, and you were saying that numbers are dangerous. So I was wondering if you would just expound a little bit upon that.
What was the context?
So there's this saying, your numbers can't hurt you, and you're saying the opposite, which is numbers are dangerous. I was wondering if you would speak to that a bit.
From that sense. I think that one, I don't think it will help. I bet I could tell people exact metrics, and successful games are so complicated that knowing a part of it won't help you. But it's often you'll run into, especially because of the stuff we're talking about, you'll end up disclosing financial numbers, and for privately held companies or publicly held companies, you can't disclose that kind of stuff. So I just stay away from the trouble.
So because I was greedy, we're out of time for questions, but your throng of adoring fans can meet you on the back wall. Please give it up for the very multi-talented Bernard Chen.
Thanks.